Welcome to Elections on Kaya. My name is Qaanitah Hunter. I'm joined today by Dr. TK Pooe. Thank you very much. You are a public policy specialist at the Wits School of Governance. How exciting is democracy in action?
No, it's quite exciting, especially this new turn of events. It shows that democracy is alive and well. People do have their say, even though what they have said is going to be probably a subject for many years to come to study.
No one said democracy is not a messy thing. Right?
Yeah. I think maybe the 3 decades of we got used to the norm. It was
predictability of
the predictability of it. It was, we kind of knew the book, just that different chapters would be written, but we kind of knew the book. Well, today it just seems like the whole book was thrown out, and we're going to be writing a whole new series of books, and it's going to be interesting to see what it looks like.
As we speak now, with 98.9% of the votes captured, the ANC is at 40.28% of the vote. That's some serious decline.
That is the type of thing where if you were in a business and your share price dropped to that level, you would have to change the CEO, change the board, and simply come in with a new strategy, and also just accept that maybe our product has not been working. That's how bad it really is.
Because essentially what the ANC lost is 3.7 million customers.
I put it this way. What the ANC lost is, and I was telling a colleague, people now see the ANC bleeds. It is human. It used to have this...
untouchable thing, no?
There was an aura about them, and what we've seen is that they bleed, and they can bleed very heavily. And the problem is, once people can see that you bleed, I always go back to Mike Tyson's first fight. The first time he got knocked down and he lost, the aura just disappeared, because it's not a given that you can ever get it back.
But that aura fueled a lot of the arrogance that we saw from the ANC. And I think that when you look at that 17 percentage points or so that the ANC has lost in this election, some of it can be attributed to the other political parties, and we'll talk about MK in a little bit. But I think the ANC misgovernance and arrogance really knocked it at its knees.
You're right. I think, look, everybody has always known. I always said everybody knew what the sins of the ANC were.
They themselves, or they tell you very well.
If you read the strategies and documents, that was it. But I think what was missing, and I still say it's missing, is that there was no viable vehicle that people could say, let us really punish the ANC. And when they saw a certain vehicle with two letters, it was the first time. And I understand that, look, we've had opposition figures for the last time, but we've never had this type of entity. Somebody who was a former president, somebody who has this gravitas, who seems to understand the zeitgeist of South Africans to do this to them. So they literally were sleepwalking, like you're saying, into mistakes, and always knowing that, listen, when it comes to the poll, there is no really alternative to us. And for the first time, that has changed.
So Jacob Zuma's MK party is now the third largest party in South Africa with 14.7% of the vote. The EFF took a knock. They declined, but they're sitting at 9.46%. But let's talk about the MK party. The MK party is not even a year old, right? It was registered in September. We only kind of knew about it in December when Cyril Ramaphosa.
Maybe he's joining. Who knows?
When Jacob Zuma made that announcement on the 16th of December. And from them, they have been running and running and running. Now the largest political party in the ANC. But what I saw, I spent a lot of time in KwaZulu-Natal in the early part of this year. What I saw was a strategic effort to just break ANC structures and co-opt it. They really were not interested in getting voters who would not vote for the ANC. They were not getting the South African vote. What they wanted was disaffected. They want here's a home for the disaffected ANC voter. And that's what you see.
Well, and I guess maybe it then brings to question and I think we have to say this, the two conferences that President Ramaphosa was said to have won. Because there was always that nagging question of, has he got a full grip on the ANC? And what the strategy you're speaking about only works if there's dissatisfaction within the ranks.
Yes.
And he seems to have really understood that, listen, I never really lost support in the movement. And it's a perfect strategy, like you're saying. Why should I go outside when there's a viable individuals and homes that I can have? And it's a blinder, to use a cricketing term that he's played. But I think, as you probably heard, there were also rumors that this didn't start 6 months ago.
No, not at all.
This man had been plotting and planning.
But let me say this, right? And you can vehemently disagree with me. The performance of the MK party, yes, it's great for the MK party. But for me, it's more indicative of the weakness of Cyril Ramaphosa than the strength of Jacob Zuma.
No, totally agree. Look, there's been something I've been saying, which I think was not quite picked up, and I'll probably have to repeat it again. If you look at how the ANC campaigned, they were campaigning on 3 decades. And I kept saying to them, but you can't campaign on what former President Nelson Mandela did. You can't campaign on what former President Thabo Mbeki did. They had their time. What has this president done in the 5 years? And it would seem to me that strategy of saying we're doing it for 3 decades was the covering for, look, we have to be honest, a president who...
And you want to say we did it for 3 decades, but at the same time you're going to say, there was 10 years that we don't want to talk about.
Exactly.
It's a bit messy if you ask me.
Yeah, so it was an issue of where I think maybe, and I think probably everybody has to kind of give account that he seems to have really been a creation of a popular media. He never really wanted to engage. It was always on his terms. He would write a letter, a la like President Thabo Mbeki, but he would always want to be aloof from the criticism.
No, because let's think about it quite seriously, right? The failures of that ANC leadership cohort in KwaZulu-Natal was evident from 2022.
Yeah.
Right? I argue that they juvenile leadership, number one. Number two, there was no appreciation of the Zulu monarchy in any way, right? And that is significant in KwaZulu-Natal. The third thing was the rampant misgovernance. So I'm sitting here from 2022, almost screaming into the abyss to say, why would you not put these guys on terms? Because it's gonna catch up to you anyways. So why are you appeasing to incompetent, mediocre people who are not growing the ANC? So they're not popular in the ANC, right? I'm talking about the current leadership of the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal, and they're messing up royally in the municipalities and in the province. Why not just make an enemy out of them and like die on one hill?
But we all know that's not the strategy of this. That has not been the strategy of this leadership.
Was there a strategy?
Yes, it was always that things would turn out well. When you start to believe your own hype, that you are this second coming of President Nelson Mandela, which I think he does seemingly believe this. And also, like you're saying, when he came in, and this has always been a criticism of mine of the president, is he never really seemed to surround himself with classical ANC thinkers. If you were to look at the people who are in the presidency, people who have actually got his ear, they're not classical ANC people who we're going to tell them that, listen, what you've just said, your strategy is not working.
Because think about it, right? If you were going to go and completely antagonize Jacob Zuma, you should have done it at the time when 2021, when you saw what Jacob Zuma was capable of doing, right? Yeah. But what happened was you tried to antagonize and then retreat and antagonize and retreat, and it didn't work because what Jacob Zuma did was retreated, created a beast, and then unleashed that beast on you.
Yeah, I think he just had his, what you call it, a Kendrick Lamar moment on this election.
I don't get the reference.
No, it'll come. Look, I think sometimes we need to be, I think probably being a bit more sober about this, is we need to probably start saying, let's not ascribe, I always say this when looking at the ANC, let's not ascribe the ideals of leadership and the practice of leadership where it doesn't fit in. Till this day, we still don't know and you're right in saying the terminology should be this leadership, because the ANC always says, look, we are a collective, so let's collectively look at them and say, I've never quite understood what their vision was post having President Ramaphosa elected.
Yeah.
Till this day, we don't have an economic development policy till this day.
Because this is what I always said, TK. Just give me 1 or 2 hills you're willing to die on. Say it's a smaller cabinet, so easy to do. Say it's, because literally what Ramaphosa had to go to the electorate with in this campaign was not much.
Yeah.
Because he couldn't even say, we were because his campaign promise in 2018 and 2019 was, we're going to lock them all up. They're going to all be in orange overalls. There's nobody in orange overalls, right? Also, a president can't do that, right? But besides the point. But let's talk about where the ANC is now. 17 percentage points is a huge knock. The ANC is a minority party in KwaZulu-Natal. Unbelievable.
Never thought we'd hear those words. So
unbelievable. But what now needs to kick into gear is coalition talks. They have about 15, 16 days before a president has to be elected in parliament, right? So the ANC had the massive drop in this election. The DA grew by 1 percentage point, which for me is dismal. If your main opponent, like the company strategy, if your competitor loses 17 percentage points of the market of customers and you grow by 1, you also have to ask yourself some serious questions.
No, I'll answer it backwards because I think that's a good point, especially the DA. Basically, the way I've put it is to say, well done, you spent all this money to go back to where you were in 2014.
Yeah.
Congratulations. And the 1% we all know comes from your campaign strategy targeting specifically
White people.
I would say what? I'd say Freedom Front Plus type voters who were disenfranchised with you guys.
Which were your 1%. You got it.
Your 1%. So
Yeah.
well done. You've basically gone back to 2014. And when your
Jeez.
president peacocks around saying we brought the ANC down. No,
you
different.
didn't.
You're reading a
You
different
didn't.
script.
I just came now from Julius Malema's press conference. He's humble. He says the EFF's growth, because the EFF really surprised us in 2019 when they showed growth in from 2014 to 2019, and he is very accurate in saying we got that growth from disaffected ANC supporters who were annoyed at what happened to Jacob Zuma. They voted for us in 2019. Now they just went back to Jacob Zuma, and I appreciate that level of that sober thinking, right? He, however, is saying, don't look at us. We're only going to lose about 2 or 3 seats. It's fine, right? Okay, cool. But the EFF wants power. And the EFF is open now to a deal with the ANC. But ANC, EFF alone is not enough, right? We thought it would be enough. And that's what everyone in the markets were worried about, that it's going to be a doomsday coalition. Add MK in the mix, and then we're seeing a real doomsday coalition. What do you think?
Well, I think this issue of the doomsday, I think we should be... Because if we do believe in the idea of, let's say, democracy, it would mean that if as much as you and I as citizens have a right to express a view, we should also allow these parties to also express a view. We could be surprised, right?
Yeah.
That's how. So I never quite put a doomsday. I just say,
because when the DA and the EFF worked together in Johannesburg, nobody called it a doomsday. It's just the outcome of coalitions.
Yeah, but I think
is what it is.
It is, but I think the bigger problem, and I'm going to try to tie Mr. Steenhuisen and Mr. Malema together, is this: that the problem is, I call it there's a Business Day article I wrote. I call it the gaze of the ANC.
Yeah.
That I only listen to opposition, and I call them officials because the leadership title we tend to be quite liberal about it. Is I only listen to them 5 minutes after they speak, because I know for the first 3 minutes it's always ANC this, ANC that. None of them have really captured us to say, this is my vision for the country. And as much as we can accuse President Ramaphosa of saying he doesn't have a vision, but if you're an electorate, what we've heard, what all the opposition parties have said, that it starts, every sentence is ANC, every media statement is ANC. Where's your vision for the country? And I think people have sort of got sick and tired of that part. But also, if we're to maybe, people always ask, what do public policy specialists do? What we do is we fix problems, right? And one of the issues I would do, and to take a step back what you said, if I was the ANC, I wouldn't be rushing for a coalition. In fact, you're in this mess because you're always rushing into things you don't think about.
But the Constitution calls for a quick fix. 14 days is not a long time.
It calls for it, but it doesn't say it has to be formal. And look, I'm stealing a page here from Mr. Franz Cronier, so people don't think I'm this. Is the idea of saying the discussions you should be having is to say, look, by the Constitution says we should form a form of government, right?
A president must be elected. That's it.
President must be elected.
Yeah.
Let's start there. Clearly, you guys are not going to give us. You're not going to give us speaker. So that's the first thing we give up. Is speaker.
Yeah.
And this is you speaking to everybody who wants to listen. And then from then on, you simply start to break it down by saying, listen, but we do need the presidency.
You're the largest political. You got the most votes. Yeah.
And also, we're going to go back, because one of the things that people have also been harping on, maybe this is time when we go back to establishing rules and, rules and general rules for what should constitute like
electoral thresholds.
Electoral thresholds, which I'm sure the DA would be more than happy to
support.
So I think it doesn't have to be formal in the sense that we're holding hands, but it could be, let's go by position, quarter by quarter.
Yeah, I'm seeing some messiness.
It's because
let me tell you this. Come here. It's September 2024 now. The president is getting onto an SAA flight. He's going to the General Assembly in New York. A government department or some government department pushes through some hectic, crazy legislation to Parliament. Say the ANC and the DA are in a marriage. The DA is pissed off. They call a motion of no confidence. Before the president lands back at Waterkloof, boom, removed.
And this is where we kind of then have to look at the Chinese saying of the power behind the throne. And we know very well who disciplines the DA in the back room.
Business.
I'd say Helen Zille. Look, you can say, many people can say, have their say about what you think of her. But the one thing that seems to be quite true about Miss Helen Zille, she runs a tight ship.
She runs a tight ship.
Now, I think an ANC DA gives that discipline, right? So the idea of, things, you leave for Beirut now, you come back next week in Johannesburg and now you're no longer president. I don't think in that type of scenario it would happen. That's what I'm saying. If you do it quarter to quarter, by quarter to quarter, I mean, who do you put as your chairpersons? Because I know those positions South Africans don't actually know who chairpersons of committees are.
So
we've not had to know.
Let's take a step back to say, what could come out of the ANC losing its majority and then having to form a coalition of some sort is, number one, they would not have unfettered power like they had before. What is the other things that you see? Well,
I think there has to be a change in because obviously they've got the top 80 by virtue of lists.
Yeah.
They have to change that. Because you cannot bring in people who are part of the same problem. By that, I mean, you can't bring in ministers who were stated to be part of the problems in how you lost these votes.
That's interesting.
Meaning you can't go with your top 20 now. You literally have to now go back within the
reconfigure
NEC,
your list.
And this is what I'm saying. Rather than rushing into things, what they should be asking is to say, look, our date is not 2029. Our date is the next election. Who will be around for that next election? And who actually has the bright ideas to do that? So then you actually look at your top 80, your NEC top 80 and say, who's around for 2023? For 2033? You start to look at it in this way. This way, you're doing one of two things, which is, I think it's critical. One, you are giving experience to people younger, not by age, but younger by experience. Because I'm not one of those people who says because you're old, you're disqualified.
Yeah, but Chike, the ANC has never been that forward-looking. Because if it were, they wouldn't have been in this position today.
That's why I say we are helping them. That's what public policy people do. If you're asking me, how do we help them? You don't put your veterans there.
What demands would the DA make if you were there at the DA?
Treasury, Minister of Finance. Yes, we'll put Mr. John Steenhuisen as a ceremonial vice president. I'm sure he'll love it. His ego will go up. But they want treasury. Treasury is where... Because look, it's a fair trade, right? Treasury means that, listen, we can go to our DA voters and say, listen, we're doing this for the country.
We stop corruption.
But we're stopping corruption. It's a win-win. So I think that's the first thing the DA would want is treasury.
But that's where the ANC and the DA fundamentally disagree, right? In terms of fiscal policy.
It's always been, and this is my reading of it, is the different departments are allowed the freedom of how they put their policies together, right? It's just an issue of now the budgeting of it. We've never really had to look at it in that way because Treasury has always been seen as the big dog at the
but also the extension of the ANC subcommittee on ETC.
It doesn't really.
No?
No.
You think bureaucrats have power in Treasury?
No, that's another problem which we haven't spoken about, which is, are our bureaucrats ready for this?
Ooh, that's our next podcast. No, really, that we have to have that conversation because I think the capacity of the state is what is critical to this political instability that's going to come. Because political instability is inevitable in a coalition like this. And what we've seen at a local level is an awful example of what can play out provincially and nationally. And you're already seeing, I mean, a place like KZN where cadre deployment was just absolutely rife for every single position. I'm exaggerating, but in the legislature or in the provincial government, it's going to be interesting to see how the state withstands this kind of change. Let's talk about the next 2 weeks. What happens next?
Well, the Tuli House's telephone bill, if they still exist, goes dramatically high.
So they have to first talk about among themselves, right?
Because remember, it's an issue where, and this is something I'm not sure if people have picked it up. You know, I used to study, like you said, you did communication, and part of communication is body language.
Yeah.
I believe, and I'll stand to be corrected, that the ANC did not see this coming.
Not at all.
And that makes it, that's why I'm saying the negotiation, never mind the 14 days. What you've just asked becomes longer because, first of all, you're still asking yourself, is
what
this real?
The heck happened?
Is this real? And what we've seen with the ANC is when they lose power, think Western Cape.
They can't regain it.
They can't
regain it. You can't regain it.
So the shock first is what's going to be happening. And then it's going
to be... Then who do they apportion blame to?
And that's what they do. I think that's what they also love doing is we have to blame someone.
But they do, right?
Yeah, no, you always need a victim. Just that Jacob Zuma was a victim last time. And look what happened. So you don't want to now cut yourself off when the local government elections are only two years away. So I think that's what I'm saying. This is not a 2-week thing. This is an issue of where, accept that you've lost one, just accept it. Let that
But they've been
in.
good at it. I must give them credit. The ANC is a good loser because they could have been performing and causing theatrics from 2016. They've accepted defeat consistently.
This is not a safe facing you have lost. I call that safe facing. I'm talking about your own internal structures. Because I can guarantee you what they're discussing is we can get this back. We can turn this around. Where do we compromise? We'll just do this just to show people that we can do it. That's the wrong conversation to have. I'm saying have a conversation and admit that we were rejected by the populace.
So you want President Ramaphosa to go on TV and say...
As an ANC president, not as a national president. Let's make that distinction.
To say, sorry.
Because that should have been the campaign, is we have messed up. And we're sorry and we hear you. We're not asking for pity. We don't deserve your pity. But what we are going to do is if they want to change the game a bit, right? Put the opposition on the back foot. Do this. Say, listen, we're inviting members of the media. We're inviting civil society to come to, I don't know, Nazareth, because that's a popular saying. And we as the ANC are open to saying, let's have these coalitions in the open. Because we understand that we've lost. We accept that. This way, those opposition parties that are looking to really make a meal out of this are going to also have to face the glare of the public.
Because the voters do not and will not accept that arrogance of we're fine, so what? Voters have just realized, no, they don't want it.
No, they're fine. They're fine at 40. That's what voters have said.
Yeah.
And it can get worse. It can still get worse for them.
So I don't understand why would you keep up your same tricks of just kind of chest beating? If there's a time for humility, it's now.
It's because you've never had to be humble. If you, I always give this illustration to students who, the ones who do actual science, who do medicine.
The clever ones.
They've never known what it's like to fail an exam. In their mind, that shock of, people fail. So it's that shock to them because look, a province, Western Cape, like you said, they got used to that, right? They got used to being the also-rans. But they've always said, we've got certain places where we've got them on lockdown, right? And a classical example of this is, look at Gauteng. When they lost, right? The way Mr. Panyaza Lusufi, on one instance, he wants to project himself as somebody who's in total control. But then a week later, or even within a week, he can come up with a crazy strategy where you're thinking, but what's happening to you? And that's what I mean by accepting it is you
have to sit with it.
Lessen that schizophrenic belief of we're great. No, we're not great. Because if you don't, you basically get into for the first Monday to Wednesday, we agree with our coalition partner.
Yeah.
But Thursday, behind the scenes, you're like, no, this is crazy to the international market. So that's what I'm saying. The 14 days are important. You've got a responsibility, right? Maybe this is where you can use your veterans to say, listen, split it, not splits. That's the wrong way to use politically. But have what they used to have when they were dealing with the problems in KZN. They used to have a top 10 or top 5.
But there isn't really those big figures in the ANC anymore.
That's why the person you put as the face that's going to help you with the coalitions in dealing with it publicly, you put someone like Minister Naledi Pandor. She seems gracious enough, and plus that's why you're a minister of DERCO, because it means you can actually negotiate. You put that person as the face, and President Cyril Ramaphosa takes a step back, because it's important he takes a step back, so that because again he's now he's the photo of failure. He needs to take a step back and allow someone like that to come in. And when I was talking about the veterans, you have to bring in President Thabo Mbeki, you have to bring in former President Kgalema Motlanthe, and you have to say, guys, where do we go from here? Because this is uncharted waters. So that's how I would play it with them. And it also goes to the point I'm saying is, you have to accept that this has happened. And And the only way an ANC accept that this has happened is when ANC people speak to ANC people.
As they say, the first step of grief is acceptance, and that's the advice given by TK Pooe from to the ANC as they sit and watch the final votes trickle in, the final few votes coming in that cements the outcome of this election, which is where are we now? Let me just double check in case it moved. Still 40%. All right. Thank you for joining us. Until next time, this was Elections on Kaya.